We've got intel providing us a plethora of information about Sony's next console, the PlayStation 5 Pro, and it seems that Sony's side hustle, the PSVR 2, is not doing well at all, given that Sony has flat out halted production on the headset. On top of this, Larian has made a risky and confident move to move away from the Dungeons & Dragons IP and are not making a Baldur's Gate 4. It's been a busy week, and I'm here to debrief you on the facts you need to know about PlayStation and the industry at large, so sit back and prepare to be debriefed, fellas. Hello friends, Hansen here, and welcome back to the DualShock Debrief, my weekly PlayStation analysis video where I analyze the general video game news of the week with a focus on Sony's PlayStation. This is Debrief number 7. As I just stated, we've got a lot of things to talk about this week, fellas, and it's been a great week here on Ent Media. We posted a video where we analyzed if whether or not GTA 6 will be sold at a $100 price point. We also assessed the fact that we've learned about 5 canceled PlayStation games in the past 3 months, all of them being live service games, by the way. We also put out 2 videos focusing on From Software, the developer of the Souls series and Elden Ring. In one video, we analyzed From's relationship with PlayStation, and in the other, we talked about what I think personally makes the Souls games so great. This video has become my highest view video thus far on this channel, and I have to say that I genuinely appreciate all of you guys out there showing up for that video. It was great to get a little wind in my sails. It's been a great week, my dudes, no doubt. Thank you all for your support, and I want to remind you that without you, I'm just some jackwagon talking into a microphone, so thanks again for clicking on this video and listening. But now we cast our gaze to the wider industry at large for the big one, the most important piece of video games news this week from my perspective. And I want to point out here, fellas, that as is typical, I've had a hard time honing on one specific piece of news to analyze for this week. Between reports of Grand Theft Auto 6 being potentially delayed into 2026, which is sad but expected given that Rockstar has a history of doing this sort of thing, and given that they're probably having a difficult transition with getting all of their workers back into the office as they've communicated that that's what they want to do as they get closer to the finish line for Grand Theft Auto 6. And on top of all of that, Grand Theft Auto 6 is probably going to be one of the most craziest and sophisticated games ever made, so that's got to be hard too. Apart from this, there is a trailer detailing Uncharted creator Amy Hennig's new Marvel game, which is titled Marvel 1943 Rise of Hydra. The name sucks, but the trailer was good, but we need a little more gameplay here. It stars Captain America and Black Panther, and it's based off the 2010 comic book titled Captain America Black Panther Flags of Our Fathers, and the story is set in occupied Paris during World War II. And I gotta say, fellas, the game looks tight, and I can't wait to check it out. There's also been reporting that Resident Evil 9 is apparently going to be an open world game, and that Overwatch 2's PvE mode is permanently dead in the water. Why the hell did they rebrand that game as a sequel again? I don't know. I say all of these things to point out that there's a lot of threads to pull at this week. But above all else, I want to draw your attention to the fact that Larian, the developers of last year's King Baldur's Gate 3, has gone on the record of saying that beyond a few more substantial updates to the game, they're moving on, not just on development of Baldur's Gate 3 and even its potential expansions, but from development on the Dungeons & Dragons IP as a whole. So yes, you heard me correctly, no Baldur's Gate 4 from Larian. When on a panel at GDC 2024, that's the Game Developers Conference for the uninitiated, Larian's founder, Sven Vincke, proclaimed that instead of continuing work on this game or a potential Baldur's Gate 4, Larian, who is now probably flushed with cash from the success of Baldur's Gate 3, is now opting to do something totally new instead. I chose to hone in on this one in particular, fellas, because I find this to be a fascinating decision, one that's filled with confidence, with a little bit of daredevil energy and risk-taking to boot. I want to point out that this is definitely a risk. The safe option would be to at least make another Baldur's Gate game, which would allow Larian to sustain growth and probably maintain steady financial gains. But there is an important piece of information that I'd like to point out. Hasbro, who owns the Dungeons & Dragons IP, has made $90 million off of this game and licensing costs. That's $90 million that Larian, who published and developed Baldur's Gate 3, effectively left on the table simply to satisfy their master for letting them use their IP that they own. I think it's obvious that Larian has effectively made their bones in this industry. They came out on top of 2023, which was one of the best years and most competitive years in the history of video games. So their decision to take a risk and pursue a more independent endeavor is certainly calculated. I think that they have the merit to publish and develop something totally new on their own now, and in doing so, they can avoid having to pay these crazy licensing costs. Time will tell if this pays off, but if Larian's game, their next game, is as good as Baldur's Gate 3, I have no doubt that they're going to be moving on to greener pastures with this decision. And with that, my dudes, it is time to conduct a solid about face and zoom in on our beloved PlayStation and the news within this ecosystem. So without further ado, let's jump right in with very important news about Sony's next official video game console, the PlayStation 5 Pro. Number 1, PlayStation 5 Pro details are officially in the wild. Two sources bring us this intel, the primary being Tom from Moore's Law is Dead, a tech-focused YouTube channel, and the secondary source being Tom Henderson from Insider Gaming, which is a very reliable video game news reporting website. Tom from Moore's Law is Dead briefs the following. System memory. So this is a comparison between the standard PS5 and the PlayStation 5 Pro. The PlayStation 5 Pro will be capable of rendering 576 gigabytes per second, a 28% increase over the PS5, which features 448 gigabytes per second. It's also detailed that the PlayStation 5 Pro's system memory is more effective than the PS5, so the bandwidth gain may increase by at least 30%. In what some interpret to be unfortunate news, the CPU is identical to the standard PlayStation 5. But there's hope here too, because there's a high CPU frequency mode which takes the CPU to 3.85 GHz, which is a tenth of an increase over the standard PS5. In this high CPU frequency mode, more power will be allocated to the CPU and it will downclock the GPU by minimal amounts, which will effectively lower the GPU's performance, but only very minimally. The most substantial increase for the PS5 Pro will be found in its GPU, its graphics processing unit. This allows things to be rendered 45% faster than the standard PS5, and will also allow for 2 to 3 times the amount of ray tracing, even 4 times in some cases. What's also detailed here is a so-called PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution Upscaling, which is PSSR for short. This features some sort of AI and machine learning magic that will allow upscaling and anti-aliasing, and PSSR will target 4K 120 frames per second and 8K 60 frames per second for console gaming, which is essentially unheard of in the space. That last piece of information is coming exclusively from Insider Gaming. All of that before was coming from Tom from Moore's Law is Dead. So that's the rub for now. There's still a lot of unknowns. And I really think that there's a lot of DualSense energy in the sense of the PSSR, the PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution Upscaling. What I mean by this is when the DualSense was first being unveiled to us and advertised to us, we really didn't know what it was capable of until we saw it running or until we experienced it for ourselves. Sony is not always the best at broadcasting and sharing what their new technological advances are necessarily capable of, so I think it's important that we kind of take a back seat on this PSSR thing and wait to see what it can actually do, because there's been a lot of concerns about the CPU because it's identical to the standard PS5, but maybe this PSSR, this PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution Upscaling, can effectively somehow increase the performance of the console, given that it's going to target 4K 120 frames per second and 8K 60 frames per second for console gaming. If this works, that's going to be a monumental leap in the console space, because 4K 120 frames per second on a standard over-the-counter console has been basically unheard of up until this point. So I think there's a lot of potential for this PSSR. But there's still a good bit of unknowns. We don't know what the price will be. I imagine it will be somewhere around $599.99, so basically $600, $620 if you include sales tax here in the United States. And we also don't know what it's going to look like. I really want to see what it looks like. I hope it's like jet black and it looks fucking sick. It's probably still going to have the same design as the PS5, you know, like kind of the vaginal sort of design that looks a little strange. But nonetheless, I cannot wait to get my hands on this thing and see what it can actually do from a technological standpoint. Any performance that I can get in my games is a big, chunky thumbs up from me, and I can't wait to see what this thing can do. While this news of the PlayStation 5 Pro seems very hopeful and promising and helps to paint a more bright future for Sony, we do have some unfortunate yet expected news regarding Sony's side hustle in the virtual reality space, so let's not dilly-dally any longer and get into it. Number 2. PSVR 2 is failing. According to reporting from Bloomberg, Sony has halted production on PSVR 2 units until they've sold a certain number of already existing units that are on store shelves and in Sony's warehouses. Bloomberg cites, quote, people familiar with Sony's plans in reporting, end quote, that PSVR 2 sales have slowed progressively since its February 2023 launch. Sony has produced, quote, well over 2 million, end quote, units of the headset. While we don't have solid sales numbers, we can imagine that given that this headset's been in the wild for over a year, this is not tracking with the PSVR 1's success. PSVR 1 reached its first million sold in just under 5 months, and I think it's difficult to imagine that PSVR 2 is doing the same. And this is given that Sony has really only shipped 1.6 million headsets. What's the reason for PSVR 2's lackluster performance? Well, there's a few things. In their reporting, Bloomberg argues that PSVR 2 is a massive change from the late 2010s when the original PlayStation VR became one of the best-selling early virtual reality headsets simply by selling to the small VR-curious slice of PlayStation 4 owners. At the time, this offered a very cheap gateway into the land of VR, given that the PSVR 1 served as one of the cheapest all-in entry points for the market. This is certainly not the case for the PSVR 2. The PSVR 2 costs more than a PlayStation 5 itself, and is still not backwards compatible with a vast majority of PlayStation VR 1 games. The pricing, along with a lack of solid games to play within its library, is effectively leading to the downfall of the success that Sony experienced in this market at its precipice. It's a damn shame knowing that the PSVR 2 is a very competent headset, but it's just not selling well, and there's really not enough games to substantiate a purchasing decision for this device. So yeah, fellas, that's the rub on the PSVR 2. Definitely not encouraging, and it really seems that Sony has squandered this opportunity to make VR a valid side hustle for them. It's very similar to the Vita's trajectory, right? Like you had the PSP, which was, from my perspective, a much more accessible and cheap device that served as a good entryway. And then you had the Vita, which was really bungled by its lack of inclusion of memory cards and the fact that memory cards cost so much. It just basically serves as like, you know, the Vita was a great piece of tech. And we have the same case here with the PSVR 2, given that it's a great piece of kit, but it's just too expensive and it doesn't have enough exclusive games to be able to support its life cycle. And given that, you know, studios like First Contact Entertainment have effectively closed down and we're working on one of the most promising games for the PSVR 2 in Firewalk 0 Hour. I mean, it's the writing's on the wall for this device. It's not doing well. It's not selling well. It's probably dead in the water. The only hope I can imagine is some sort of killer app like a Astro's Rescue Mission 2, the sequel to the very successful PSVR 1 game, which really gave entry to Astro as like some sort of mascot platformer for PlayStation. I really think that's the only hope for this device, but time will only tell what's going to happen with this headset. Now, fellas, we do have a potential number 3 here, but I already made a video covering this piece of news that I'm about to touch on. It regards the Spider-Man The Great Web trailer, which was leaked online. If you're not tracking, essentially Insomniac was making some sort of live service Spider-Man game where there was, a connected multiverse of Spider-Man, and you can go play with your friends and like fight bad guys and stuff like that. I'm not going to do a whole news item, but just know that I made a whole video detailing 5 live service games that have been canceled from PlayStation, so you can go check that out if you want, and I'll include that link to my video in the description so you can get those details there. Fellas, as always with the DualShock debrief, let's conclude with what I've been playing, because I have some updates for you guys. I've been checking out Astro's Playroom, which is, I gotta just be honest, like it's definitely my favorite PS5 exclusive of this generation. I absolutely love this game. I love that it celebrates PlayStation's history. I love that it is such a fun and simple and childish in a lot of ways, just action mascot platformer. It controls very well. Astrobot is like this awesome protagonist. It's like really cute and like super endearing and is just really awesome. And the game is so simple. It only has like 5 core levels, and then it has like speed running levels that you can do. You fight, like it's super great. It celebrates PlayStation history. You can collect all essential like PlayStation devices, including like some super niche ones like the Pocket Station, which was a PS1 accessory device that served as like some sort of memory card and like Tamagotchi type thing. You should look it up. I actually might make a video about that, but it's just a really great game that I have completed now like 3 or 4 times just because I love it so much. It brings me back to a good place. If I'm ever like kind of sad or down at the dumps, I can play this game as something to kind of go back to and feel good. The music is amazing. It's just awesome. Like, I love Astro's Playroom. I can't wait to see what Asobi does next. I really think that they're the most slept on PlayStation studio far and away. I think they're incredibly talented, especially when it comes to making these sort of mascot platformers. I just think they're great. So I really can't wait to see what's next from them. And I have completed like basically all of Astro's Playroom once again. I've collected everything, done all the levels. It's been awesome, man. I love that game a lot. And on top of this, I am still progressing on my Sekiro Platinum trophy. Now I have gotten all the way back to the Shura ending of the game, where you essentially have to do a few things at the end of the game in order to get this trophy that shows that you've defeated all the bosses. So once I complete this, all I have to do at this point is go back and finish upgrading a lot of the ninja tools in the game, and I think I have to fully acquire all the skills, which is just going to require some grinding. So I'm imagining that's going to take like 3 to 4 hours of gameplay if I really like lock in and get it done. But Sekiro is amazing. Love it. I'm ready to move on to something new at this point and really get this Platinum trophy done, because it's been in the works for a long time now. So hopefully I can bring you good news next week. But nonetheless, that is all we've got for this week's episode of the DualShock Debrief. I greatly appreciate all of you tuning in. I've gotten like 10 new subscribers over the past week, which has been super great to see. Hopefully we just keep going from here. I'm trying to get videos out as consistently as I can. I'm aiming for every other day of the week, but that's a lofty goal considering I work like a full-time job and am married and have a house and like try to stay fit and all that shit. So, we'll see how it goes. But nonetheless, that's all I've got, fellas. This is Hansen with Ent Media, out.